Hello, I'm Lisa Hayes with Dreams for Society, and I'm so excited to have Zach Adamson with us today. He is an Indianapolis City County Councilor. He's serving his fourth year and up for re-election in November.
That's right.
And you have been an ardent supporter of community development, small business. We're in his small business right now, Urban Designs. And Zach, you just got recently appointed to the United States Small Business Administration Region 5 Regulatory Fairness Board. And my understanding is that that board is going to be charged with looking for federal regulations that don't serve currently small businesses, so that you can wipe them off the books and start to develop a fairness about the regulatory environment of small businesses so that they can continue to grow.
Sure.
So with that, Zach, I'd like you to embellish on what I have just said about you. But first, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, the journey of your life, maybe childhood and young adulthood, how you came about to have this passion, not only for community development and small business and owner now for the last 18 years, but also your drive to be a public servant, to serve us. So Zach?
Well, Lisa, my desire to really be involved in the public sector, being a public servant, really does sort of stem from my childhood. I'm originally from Marion, Indiana. This is about 70 miles north of Indianapolis. And my grandparents were very engaged in community service for the Latino community in Marion. My grandmother was a big civil rights advocate back in the 70s. She fought for improved working conditions for migrant workers back in the 70s. It's being raised in that sort of background really gave me a sense of responsibility and commitment to my community. So as I grew up, I really realized that there was a place for everybody to fit into those kind of places in society. And as I moved into Indianapolis and started getting involved with neighborhoods and my own small business, I realized that I was sort of hitting a wall at how much I could influence from the outside, and was really determined that I could probably best impact things from the inside. And so that's when I decided to run for city council.
So it's in your lineage.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny how that works?
Yeah. I think it's probably biological to some degree too, but I think you do raise children to be responsible and engaged and committed citizens. So.
Well, as you know, we have Dreams for Society has a template of imagine, visualize, and create. And what we're all about is asking public servants, civic leaders, all kinds of people that are leading our best interests to imagine something that currently may not be serving us, but to imagine and visualize and then hopefully create a better whatever it is. And today I would love for you, if you might, pick one thing amongst a plethora, I'm sure, of many issues that you would like to see changed for the better, many topics. Would you be able to pick one maybe today that we could focus on in terms of imagining and visualizing and creating with you something in our minds that would serve us better?
There are so many to choose from. I know currently I'm working on improving the care and treatment ordinances for animal welfare in our city. I spent a great deal working on environmental justice issues. The Harding Street coal plant is going to stop burning coal in Marion County. But I think the biggest issue for me, the one that weighs the heaviest on my emotions are, I guess, economic injustice. And if I had to pick something that I think I would like to see remedied, it would be that. And creating an economic stability in our communities, building on the viability of those commercial corridors that are already existing. Our city is actually set up well for those commercial districts, and I think that if we get back to that sustainable community development, sustainable economic development in those communities will also serve to sort of level out that economic injustice and the economic inequality that I think creates divisions in our community.
Well, what area in Indianapolis are you thinking of? Is there a specific area that you would love to see revitalized?
There are several. I mean, we've got Mass Avenue is going to be in my new district, and we've seen how much success we've had by revitalizing that economic corridor. It's one of the most vital and alive places in our city now, but that wasn't the case 15 years ago. No, 20
Can you
years
tell
ago.
the viewers where Mass Avenue is for those that might be outside of Indianapolis?
Sure. Mass Avenue is one of our major downtown hotspots. It's a diagonal street that sort of leads right into the heart of the city, and it's jam-packed full of commercial businesses, everything from exotic toy stores to every kind of imaginable restaurant, nightlife, bars, clubs, everything. It's really just theaters of various kinds. It's really the happening place in Indianapolis. So
it is amazing the transformation that has occurred in just the last 5 years even.
Sure.
It is a fantastic expression of what the potential is in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and we're looking at replicating that same model for Fountain Square area now too. So that's another district in Indianapolis that runs along Virginia Avenue that runs diagonal to the south of the city. And it's a perfect example of another kind of neighborhood commercial corridor that is being revitalized. But we have a lot of those in the city, and we've really, I think, would benefit from doing that, replicating that. Maybe not on that grand a scale, but at least to some degree, determining what kind of businesses are missing in communities. And back in the olden days, back before we had the exodus out of the urban core, neighborhoods used to be sustained by small businesses in that general vicinity. Many times manufacturing nearby was the employer of a lot of the residents there. You had a local church where everybody went to church there. You had a commercial corridor where you had a grocery store, you had a dry cleaner, you had a laundry, you had everything that you would need was in walking distance, and you could basically take care of all your needs right there in your own neighborhood. Everything from work to play to the necessities of life. And as the manufacturing went away, the population left the area, and those commercial corridors became vacant and abandoned. And as that started to happen, more what I call opportunistic businesses sort of infilled in that vacuum. And so now we see a lot of those corridors are lined with check cashing stores, rent-to-own stores, discount liquor, things of those nature that I believe are more parasitic in nature than those kind of businesses that actually contribute or partner with the community to its vitality and sustainability. And I think if we start to identify more of these corridors that could benefit from that reestablishment of those commercial corridors, I think that would be the way to do it, is to establish sustainable economic development in there, commercial development that feeds the community, meets the needs of the neighborhoods. We'll see people moving back into the urban core because they can take care of all their needs in that one place.
And I feel an amplification of goodwill being restored in those communities.
Absolutely.
A sense of community and goodwill being amplified.
One of the best examples I have is Pogues Run Grocer, which is on the Near East Side.
I love that. I'm a co-op owner.
I'm member number 10. So I'm one of the founding members. We started meeting in the living room of one of my neighbors, and because we have the issue of food deserts, and that's also a symptom of the economic inequality in our city. If you look at more affluent communities, they have 5 or 10 options of places to go and buy groceries, but they also have viable transportation. They're not struggling for ways to get around town. But if you look around the areas where people don't have reliable transportation, they're lucky to have one grocery store. And in fact, most people in struggling communities do their grocery shopping at convenience stores or gas stations or Dollar General or Big Lots or things like that. And you can't raise families or develop young brains on food that you buy from places where there are no vegetables or high quality rich foods. So we decided that instead of waiting around for the city to do it, we created our own grocery store, and that's how Pogues was born. But it's one of the most popular places in the area, primarily not because they're just a place to buy food and that's lacking in the area, but also because the community came together and said, this is ours.
Yes.
This is something we need, and we came together and for years struggled to build. And so they've done a remarkable job of just keeping the community engaged as well. And those are the kind of businesses I think that not only meet needs in the community, but sustain the community. And I think that we as a city, I think if we're going to really combat the issues around us, are going to have to get around to dealing with the economic injustice of creating living space, sustainable living space for people.
And I love this vision, Zach. And what's coming to mind for me as well is we all want a sense of belonging. And the way that our communities have been cut up in the recent 50 years or so, really we lost that sense of belonging. And with Pogues Run Grocery, which is about 3 miles from me, but I'll go there before I go anywhere else, because it not only has local grown food, but it has a lot of organics.
Right.
But the most important thing about it is I love the vibe.
Right. Oh yeah.
And all the people know me when I go in there, and I love the people that go in there to shop. It is a great sense of belonging.
It is. There used to be a time when this was a regular occurrence, but it never happens anymore.
Yeah.
Once I had gone in there and I was shopping and I had a bag full of stuff that we were putting in there, and I reached around to grab my wallet and I had left it at the house. And I thought, oh no, now I've got to leave my groceries sitting in this bag on the stand and go get my wallet and come back and pick this up and then bring it home. And they said, oh, don't worry about it. Just pay us when you come back in the next time you're in. And I go in probably once or twice a month, but when does that ever happen? It never happens. But that's what community-based economic development does. Yeah. And when you have that kind of sustainable economic development in there, not only creates jobs, and one of the nice things about Pogues also is that the majority of the people that live there, I think they have like 10 or 12 employees, and I think 9 of them live within 5 blocks of the building.
I heard that, yeah.
And that's sustainable economic development. And these commercial corridors that run throughout our city, especially through Center Township, which I think is the most desperately impacted with the economic downturn in the city. I think that can most benefit from this kind of economic development, focused economic development on sustainable commercial corridors.
And as we start to get to know our neighbors again, we can collaborate and co-create and help each other in ways that we never even imagined, that may not be might not be a monetarily backed idea. It might just be a hug a hug or a pat on the back.
But there's a lot more to that than just the superficial things. I mean, when you have a good bonding relationship with people that you're in your community, neighbors who know you will watch your house when you're gone. Right. They'll keep an eye on your kids, and those things. When I was growing up, if you were doing something you shouldn't be on one side of town, by the time you got home, your mother knew about it because everybody in town was watching,
right.
And they would kind of say, "No, Kathy, your kids are at it again." So we can get back to that sense of community, and
yes.
I think when we have this sustainable economic corridors, we get back to that because people start to get out and they meet their neighbors, they see each other at these places. Because the community meets their needs.
Right. Oh, I love that. So we've talked about Center Township, we've talked about Mass Avenue, we've talked about Fountain Square, all beautiful communities, just either in the heart of Indianapolis or to the south or to just near north. I love that. And a lot of those communities are, except for Center Township, there may be some challenges still.
I like to look at it, the other areas that are in my district currently are the Near East Side where Pogues is.
Right.
And that's where a lot of my ideas come from, is working in community development over there. But in my new district, in District 17, when I'm running for re-election, actually includes Martindale Brightwood. So that is just north of the interstate, which is, again, one of what the interesting thing is my new district will have some of the most affluent areas. I've got Lockerbie and Mass Avenue, Chatham Arch neighborhoods where there are $1 million homes, but I also have the 46218 zip code, which is one of the most economically challenged areas in the city, with between the 46218 and 46201 zip codes, they have some of the highest abandoned property numbers in the entire state. So, there is such a vast contrast between the needs of both areas. We're talking about important things for Lockerbie, where there are, $2 million homes. It's not the same conversation I have with, the grandmother who is routinely robbed in Martindale-Brightwood. But I like to think of the areas like Martindale-Brightwood as opportunities to improve those kind of conditions, and they're more of a blank slate. And we're starting to realize the communities there have also, they've got the human capital infrastructure there already. They're just waiting for the opportunities. And I think I'm really looking forward to working in that community, and it's because of all the opportunities there.
I love your terminology, human capital infrastructure. Maybe that's yours. I've not heard it before. Well, can you expound on that for the viewers? Human capital infrastructure, meaning that there are probably a lot of people willing to co-create.
That's exactly what it means.
But they don't have the direction.
Right. Yeah. Okay. They're sort of disconnected, but they're engaged.
Okay.
There are a lot of people. There's got to be 3 or 4 different community little organizations in the Martindale-Brightwood area that I'm discovering. That's just sort of superficial exposure to the community. I've only been the last couple of months been working in that area, and I because I don't currently represent them, I have to sort of do that in my spare time, which there is very little. But I do want to make sure that I'm going into this new season with my feet on the ground and hit the ground running, because they do have a lot of needs, and they do have the opportunities that are there are immense, but they are still needing of a lot of attention. So I really want to be able to hit the ground running.
What's one thing in that area that you think you could do right away without too many obstacles that you could co-create with them there?
Well, I think the simplest thing that we can do as a city, and this is what I have heard this over and over again throughout the city, one of the things that communities really, really desire, and that is to have an identity. And when communities have an identity, they can develop that pride, they can develop that connection to their community, to their neighbors, and to their commercial corridors and their educational opportunities, their schools, and they once they start to have that connection to all of these things, then you can start to apply, how do these things relate to me? How do they impact my life? Well, if I'm a part of this community and I throw this trash on the ground, that hurts my community. And so once they start to have ownership of this community, but you have to start with that identity.
I love this idea. It's so simple, but yet true.
It is very simple. And so just working in the Martindale-Brightwood area now, one of the things that they want is they want to see the name of their community on a sign somewhere.
Okay.
They want to drive down the road and know, I have entered Martindale-Brightwood. And
Okay.
those are the simple kind of things. And how difficult is it to put a sign up saying, you have entered Martindale-Brightwood? This gives them, at least on the surface, and it begins to create that connection, that bond between the people that live there. Because when you live in Martindale-Brightwood and you pass the sign, you know when you've crossed into the area, and you know you've come home. And that makes a difference when you're especially when you've got so many challenges in the area.
Right.
But it helps people develop that sense of pride.
Oh, and I love this. And then so a sign, and then bringing together the 5 or 6 community groups that you've already identified in the area.
Yeah, and they do communicate to some degree, but I think once they have somebody in city government who's willing to advocate on behalf of their issues, to really focus their priorities, I think that's how we'll start to see some changes in the area.
I'm so excited. I'm really ready to see this neighborhood brighten up.
Yeah,
no pun intended.
They've got a lot of like I said, opportunities out there, and they've got 2 big parks. They've got Washington Park. They've got Douglas Park, which has got a golf course there. They've got a lot of housing opportunities. They've got the opportunities for community garden space, just regular community space, pocket parks. When you've got abandoned housing issues or abandoned property issues, you've got people will tend to dump garbage there.
Yes.
The property owners won't mow them.
Yeah.
But what if we turn one or two of those spaces that are strategically placed into community
I was just going to
spaces,
say, I
like
hope you
like
suggest
a garden,
that.
like
Yes.
a community garden, or
And a recreation center.
Well, recreation centers take a lot of money, so those are difficult to come up with, especially with the revenue stream of the city.
Maybe just a place for people to go play chess or checkers.
Well, again, that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
We're creating spaces,
beautiful spaces for belonging,
public space, and you create these public spaces. Make sure that they are inviting spaces.
Yes.
Make sure that they
are safe
spaces, right? And so, every block in Martindale Brightwood has got one or two of them that have been abandoned and vacant.
So
and
many abandoned homes there.
And so, wouldn't it be great to, instead of having people setting in their houses in their air conditioning, that every now and then you'll see them at their little community space, that they'll work on a community picnic, or harvesting the vegetables from the community garden.
But the homes, even though they're abandoned, they have such good bones.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're not abandoned too long, you can really bring back the energy and beauty of that home pretty quickly.
One of the priorities that we did this year that was really important was the landlord registry program.
Good.
That was very controversial, and I understand why a lot of landlords would find it kind of threatening. But if you're a good landlord, then this really doesn't really impact you too much at all. But the problem is that we were seeing that a number of houses, before they became wards of the city, properties that the city would then have to maintain, we'd have to constantly keep them boarded, we have to mow the grass on those properties. Before they progressed to that point, right before that, they were poorly kept rentals.
Yes.
And so we figured if we can catch these properties before they get to that poorly kept rental stage, we can sort of cut off the flow of houses into the stock of houses that the city has to maintain, which continually blight these communities. And so that is a really important first step. And what the beauty of it is, it's not proactive. We don't go around and find the landlords around town and make sure they're all registered, but we do charge the neighborhoods to keep an eye out on the apartments that are the rentals in their communities. And if they see problems, to call it in to the landlord registry to make sure that they are on the list.
Right.
If they are not on the list, that's how we start to hold these property owners accountable.
Yes.
And I think accountability is one of the biggest challenges we have. Property accountability is one of our biggest challenges.
And the landlords, they'll become embarrassed after a while.
Yeah.
Some
of them don't even live in town, so it's hard to embarrass them.
Okay,
So,
then there needs to be a turnover.
Right.
And that will happen gradually. I mean,
That's part of the issue that with the landlord registry is that you now have to have a local agent. So there is somebody that we can hold accountable, even if the property owner is in North Carolina somewhere. So
out of town property owner.
yeah.
Well, I am so enthusiastic about waiting for all this to happen. I'm going to ride my bike around there.
Well, it's a process. And there's a lot of variables that you have to take into consideration. And in a perfect world, things just flow perfectly and we develop and there aren't any hitches. But keep in mind that my district is one of 25 other districts in the city, and we're all going to be fighting for the same resources and the same attention and the same development, and each one has its unique challenges. And my job as a city councilor, I guess, for that area is to become its chief advocate, to make sure that I'm going out and making sure that the Near East Side and that the Martindale Brightwood area and even Mass Avenue and Fountain Square, which are also both in my district, making sure that everybody's getting the advocate that they deserve. And that's probably one of the most important rules that we have as being a city councilor.
Well, I just looked up online the other day. I was curious about some things, and for a mile of road, a highway costs just one single lane about $1 million, $500,000 to $1 million. And that's infrastructure. Human capital infrastructure doesn't cost a dime.
It doesn't, but the problem that we run into is that after years of neglect, just like regular infrastructure, it takes that much more effort to bring it back up to the levels that you need them to be. So the longer you go without having an engaged community, the harder it is to get people back engaged. When we don't have enough police to respond to the calls that are coming in, it's challenging to get people to want to be engaged. I mean, how many times will we tell a neighbor, when you see something suspicious, call it in? How many times before they stop calling it in do they have to have that not answered? How many times do they have to have a situation where the police aren't responding in a timely manner? So that police shortages desperately impact those kind of things. So the longer these communities have felt like they haven't been listened to, or that their issues haven't been a priority for anybody, the harder it is to get them back engaged. And I think I'm pretty lucky because of the human capital that is there. They are fired up and they are ready to go. And I think sometimes when you hit the bottom, you come back a little stronger because
you hit that miserable wall and you just can't. It can't get any more miserable. You just have to go up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think a lot of them are at that place now, and so I'm excited to work with them.
I am so excited that you're a representative of them.
Yeah.
And he is going to get reelected. You better get reelected because we need you.
Thank you.
Is there anything more you would like to add, Zach, today?
Well, I think Indianapolis is in a very interesting place right now. One of the worst things that you can say about Indianapolis, though, is that we're in Indiana, and our state legislature is often putting a lot of burden on our city that we shouldn't have to deal with. That is a little unfair. Everything from economic conditions to revenue sources to backwards, hyper-religious philosophies that they install that make us look a lot more backwards than we really are. And Indianapolis, I think, has surprised me beyond measure each time the opportunity to stand up against the legislature and how backwards they can become. I have been amazingly surprised at how engaged the city has become. Everything from Republicans and Democrats, independents, libertarians. We've got the African Americans, Latinos, Caucasians. You've got income variables that are like the well-off, the economically challenged. And everybody was outraged over the most recent issue, the RFRA issue.
Right, and that's near and dear to your heart.
Right.
Being the first openly gay city-county councilor, this is a huge step you've taken for Indianapolis, and I like to call it Indiana, just for the viewers.
Yeah.
So instead of Indiana cornfields,
Yeah.
we're in the new template of Indiana.
Yeah.
And you're helping with that.
Yeah. Well, I think that the legislature is far and away vastly more behind the times than the electorate is. And I think that's partly to do because of their gerrymandering. But I've been very, very excited and happy to see how engaged people from all over the state have been when they've been unjustly labeled for the actions of the legislature.
Exactly. And so many of the soldiers, so to speak, the vast majority of the Indiana women and men of the Indiana General Assembly aren't really tied closely to the overall panoramic education of these issues. They're beholden to their caucuses. They're beholden to maybe a few constituents in their district, and they learn about a lot of these things after the fact, when it's almost too late. But we did have the RFRA fix, and it looks like we haven't had too much of an economic disaster as a result of it.
Again, fortunately, the city of Indianapolis primarily has come out and really had to work overtime to make sure that the image that they had put out, and that was not just Indianapolis and Indiana dealing with how we were made to feel, but that was an international black eye that the state had to deal with. And so every dollar that our Chamber of Commerce or our tourism board had to spend to try to mitigate the negative impacts of that was a dollar we didn't spend on bringing in another convention or trying to court new businesses to come to town to provide economic development for the residents here. So we've done again, the Chamber of Commerce and Visit Indy were both stellar leaders in that fight, but the fix really only highlighted the fact that in Indiana you can still be fired for being gay.
Exactly.
And so there are a lot of inequities that still exist in our state, but we're moving forward, I think, and the population, fortunately or unfortunately, is actually moving far and above away from where the legislature even is. So hopefully they'll move forward at some point too.
I hope so. The real fix would have been put clearly in our statute that there is no discrimination whatsoever, regardless of gender, regardless of race. They have that, but regardless of sexual orientation, that's what needed to be added, and it hasn't been yet. But we're moving toward that. I really feel like it.
I think so, and I'm hopeful that the legislature will agree that it is definitely an expectation, not just of the people in the state currently, but also the younger generations that demand it.
And they don't get it. The younger generation doesn't understand what is this all about.
They don't understand it, and they will tell you that I will not live in a state that does this to people. And so we may not know for another decade the real impacts of this. When we're talking about how many young people have moved off to cities that we compete with because they saw those news stories. That because the young person who's graduating from college this year, who is watching on their dorm room TV, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, Al Jazeera, NPR, every news station on the planet was talking about how backwards Indiana was. Now, when you graduate from college, then you're looking at a list of employers. You're not going to look at the ones that are located in a city that does that, or in a state that does that. And companies know that. Companies that are looking to relocate know that if they cannot find a workforce to move to that location, they won't be successful. So they won't locate their businesses in a place that's uninviting to a workforce.
And I'm hoping what's happened, as you said, that several of the communities, the activists in Indianapolis, have been stellar in their overreaching to the rest of the country. We're not about discrimination. Everyone's welcome. And so I think it has really been front and center to maybe put in their internal compliance procedures a little heavier, or provide more benefits that they didn't have in their insurance policies. Something to demonstrate to these college graduates or whomever. Don't listen to what you read.
I think the thing to do is to make sure that the legislature, one, realizes the mistake that they had made, and two, take steps to eliminate that disparagement. So I think until we do that, Indiana, it'll be difficult to just tell people, pay no attention to what is true.
Well, we can't go back to sleep. We've got to stay awake and continue to move forward in this new paradigm that I call it a new paradigm of inclusion, equality, freedom, justice, happiness, peace, joy. I mean, let's talk about how we're going to create all these beautiful things.
And when we envision a world that is our ideal situation, when we think about that in our mind's eye, those are the things that we think of. Everybody wants to feel safe. Everybody wants to feel like they matter, like they are a part of this community, and not something that has been singled out or excluded or allowed to be treated differently. And I think young people understand that, and we just have to get the lawmakers to see it too.
I love that, Zach. I really love your imagination, vision, and your willingness to create in your own district something beautiful for us.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, and good luck in your re-election.
Yeah, thanks.
And until next time, thank you so much for watching us today.